"Daddy, why is she sleeping here?" asked the little girl. The millionaire single dad took her home on Christmas Eve. Snowflakes drifted gently through the air, shimmering beneath the golden glow of New York's Christmas lights. The streets were alive with holiday cheer, families bundled in scarves and coats, couples laughing beneath strings of twinkling bulbs, children pointing excitedly at shop windows decorated with snowmen and reindeer. The black Range Rover pulled up near a quiet bus stop just a few blocks from the Rockefeller Christmas tree. Michael Carter stepped out first, tall and composed, his dark overcoat brushing against his crisp navy suit. He extended his hand, and a little girl with curls the color of sunlight jumped down into the fresh layer of snow. "Stay close, sweetheart," he said gently, adjusting her white knit hat. "We'll go see the big tree, then head home for Coco, okay?" "Okay, Daddy," Kelly beamed, holding his hand tightly. The city felt magical that night. Christmas Eve always did. But Michael's eyes were distant, as if the lights of the season could never quite reach him. It had been 2 years since he lost his wife, and though he tried his best to smile for Kelly, the hole in his chest never fully closed. They walked slowly past the glowing storefronts, Kelly chattering about Santa and how many cookies they should leave by the fireplace. But suddenly, she stopped. Her voice fell to a whisper. "Daddy, why is that lady sleeping there?" Michael turned to where Kelly was pointing, the old wooden bench at the edge of the bus stop. There, curled up beneath the flickering bus route sign, was a young woman. She looked barely 20. Her blonde hair was messy, tangled with flakes of snow. She wore a pale, worn-out sweater that barely reached her elbows. In her trembling arms, she held something close to her chest. Michael stepped forward a little, squinting. It was a baby. Wrapped in a thin, frayed blanket, the infant lay still, cheeks red from the biting cold, tiny fingers poking out and trembling slightly in the wind. Michael's heart tightened. He instinctively reached for Kelly's hand to keep walking. They were just strangers, after all. The city was full of stories you could not fix. But Kelly pulled back. "Daddy," she said again, more firmly this time, eyes wide. "She has a baby. He's so little. Daddy, he's cold." Michael looked down at his daughter. Her small face was earnest, concern written in every innocent feature. For a moment he hesitated, his breath visible in the frosty air, mind swirling between logic and emotion. Then something shifted. Without a word, he slowly bent down and began to unwrap the soft red scarf from Kelly's neck. She said nothing, just watched as her father stepped toward the sleeping girl. Kneeling beside the bench, Michael gently laid the scarf over the baby, careful not to startle either of them. The infant stirred slightly, lips moving in his sleep. Michael glanced up at the young woman. Her skin was pale, almost blue around the edges of her lips. Her arms clutched the child tighter, even in unconsciousness, as if instinctively guarding him. He reached out a hand and touched her shoulder lightly. "Miss," he said, voice low but urgent. "Miss, you can't stay out here tonight." She did not respond. Michael leaned closer, concern deepening. His voice broke just slightly. "Please, wake up." The wind blew a little harder then, sending a chill through his spine. In the distance, a chorus of carolers could be faintly heard, singing Silent Night, and yet, nothing about this moment felt silent. He turned back briefly and saw Kelly watching him, not with fear, but hope. And that was all he needed. He turned back to the young woman, still kneeling, determination settling into his features. "You're coming with us," he said under his breath, not quite sure who he was trying to convince, her or himself. Grace Miller awoke in a jolt of panic. The cold hit her first, sharp and biting. Then came the fear. Her arms clutched the bundle in her chest, her baby. Her eyes flew open. Snow was falling, heavier now. Her back ached from the frozen bench. But what startled her most was the tall man kneeling beside her, the scent of cologne and city air clinging to him. He was dressed in a tailored coat, leather gloves. and he was holding something in his arms. Her baby. "No!" she gasped, lunging forward. "Give him back!" The man didn't flinch. His voice was steady and low. "Hay's freezing. You need to come inside." She tried to stand, her legs trembling. "I don't need your pity." Michael Carter studied her. Young, barely 20, her blonde hair was tangled and crusted with frost, her lips cracked, her sweater stretched thin. But it was her eyes that held him, defiant, desperate, exhausted. The baby stirred weakly. Michael adjusted the scarf, his daughter's scarf, around the infant's small body. The child's skin was pale, his lips tinged blue. "I'm not offering pity," he said. "I'm offering warmth." Grace's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "People only help when they want something. I've learned that the hard way." A gust of wind cut through them. The baby let out a weak, wheezing cough, then another. Michael stood, holding the baby tighter. "You can come or not, but I'm not leaving him to freeze." For a moment, Grace didn't move. Her arms ached for her son. Every part of her screamed to grab him back, to run, but something in the man's eyes stopped her. They weren't cruel. They weren't suspicious. They were kind, like a father's. She took a hesitant step. "His name is Noah," she whispered. Michael nodded. "I'm Michael, my car's nearby." She glanced at her soaked shoes, then back at her baby, swaddled in a scarf that wasn't his, held by a man she didn't know. But her feet moved. She followed. Inside the Range Rover, the world felt surreal, warm, too quiet. Grace curled up in the back seat, watching every move as Michael adjusted Noah's blanket. A little girl peeked over the seat, watching her with wide, curious eyes. "She's so young," Grace murmured. "She's 4, Michael replied, catching her gaze in the mirror. "Her name's Kelly." Grace nodded. "She's beautiful." For a moment, silence settled. Then Callie asked softly, "What's your baby's name?" "Noah," Grace said. Kelly smiled. "He's really tiny, like a snowflake." Michael's eyes flicked to the mirror again. Grace was staring out the window, but he saw the shimmer of tears she wouldn't let fall. Grace had once believed in fairy tales, before it all fell apart. She had been a sophomore at a liberal arts college, majoring in fine arts. She loved drawing, people, places, moments in between. Her professors praised her work. Then came the boy, the promises, the mistakes, the test that turned positive. When she told him, he disappeared. When she told her family, strict, religious, unbending, they gave her an ultimatum. "You've brought shame into this house," her mother said. "If you keep it, you leave." She left. No job, no money, no support. Just a child she hadn't been ready for, and yet couldn't abandon. She bounced between shelters, then the streets. Food went to Noah. Coats were wrapped around him. Every night was a fight to survive. Christmas Eve was just another night to get through. Until now. As the car moved smoothly through the snowy streets, Grace broke the silence. "Why did you stop?" Michael didn't answer right away. He thought of Kelly, of that first moment he held her after the accident. The silence that filled the house for 2 years. The weight of grief he couldn't shake. "I guess," he said finally. "Someone once told me, if you can help and don't, it's the same as walking away." Grace looked at him. He was the type she usually avoided, powerful, composed, rich, but there was something else. Not in his suit, not in the car, in his voice. It wasn't belief in her, but belief in doing the right thing. She looked at Noah, now sleeping soundly in the arms of a stranger, wrapped in a child's scarf, breathing easier. For the first time in months, the weight in her chest loosened. She leaned back against the seat, arms still curled on her lap like she was holding Noah. Michael glanced at her once more in the mirror. He didn't smile, but something in his face softened, and for the first time in 2 years, Christmas Eve felt different. The elevator doors opened to reveal the top floor of one of Manhattan's most exclusive high-rises. Grace had never seen anything like it. Warm light poured across polished hardwood floors. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a sweeping view of the snowy skyline. In the corner stood a towering Christmas tree, glowing with gold and red ornaments. It looked like a scene from a movie. Her breath caught. Michael stepped out, carrying Noah. Kelly skipped ahead, calling, "Come on, this is your room, baby. Noah." She disappeared into a guest room, turning on a soft nightlight shaped like a moon. A small bassinet stood nearby, unused since Kelly was a baby, but spotless. Grace hovered in the doorway, arms crossed tightly. She didn't step inside. Michael noticed. "You're safe here," he said gently. "Take the room, rest. We'll talk in the morning." Grace gave a small nod. Once he left, she sat on the edge of the bed, still in her coat. After a moment, she laid Noah in the crib and sat beside him, one hand resting on his chest. It was the first night she didn't sleep with one eye open. The next morning, Grace rose early. She found the laundry room by accident and washed Noah's blanket and her sweater, still smelling faintly of the street. Then, in the kitchen, she wiped the spotless counters and made a simple breakfast, eggs and toast. She was rinsing the dishes when Michael walked in, still in his robe. "You're up early?" he said, surprised. Grace shrugged lightly. "I work for what I use, always." He looked at her for a moment. There was no bitterness in her voice, only quiet dignity. "I'll make the coffee," he said. Later that morning, Mrs. Margaret Hill arrived. She had worked for the Carters for over a decade, practical, sharp, loyal. She immediately noticed the extra dish in the sink, unfamiliar footprints, and the faint scent of baby powder. She found Michael in his study. "Sir," she said quietly, "we have a guest." Michael nodded. "Her name is Grace. She and her baby will be here for a while." Margaret frowned. "You do not know her. What if she's just after your money?" "It happens, especially to men like you." Michael closed his book. "She was sleeping at a bus stop with her infant. I don't think this is a scam." Margaret hesitated. "Even so, kindness should be measured, especially with Kelly in the house." Neither noticed Grace standing in the hallway, holding a clean towel. She had heard everything. Without a word, she turned back into the guest room and quietly began packing. She dressed Noah with shaking hands, folding the blanket, pressing it close around him. "Let's go, baby," she whispered, "before we wear out the welcome." She opened the bedroom door and stepped into the hallway. Kelly came running, nearly knocking her off balance as she wrapped her arms around Grace's legs. "Please don't go," she cried. "Mommy said helping others is the best gift. You and Noah are our gift." Grace froze. Then came footsteps. She looked up to see Michael standing at the end of the hallway, hands in his pockets, his face unreadable. He had heard everything: Margaret's doubt, Grace's quiet retreat, Kelly's pleading. And in that moment, he was back in a hospital room 2 years ago, holding his wife's hand as she whispered, "Be kind, Michael, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." He swallowed, his voice soft. "You're not using us, Grace. You're doing everything but that." She stood still, arms wrapped around her child. Michael stepped forward. "Please, stay." The days after Christmas passed gently, wrapped in soft music and firelight, the kind of warmth Grace hadn't known in a long time. She spent her mornings in the sunroom, a quiet space with tall windows and a snow-dusted view of Central Park. Michael had once used it as a reading nook, but it quickly became Grace's studio. In a forgotten corner, she found a box of old art supplies, charcoal, sketch pads, brushes. She asked if she could use them. "They were my wife's," Michael had said. "She used to paint here." Kelly joined Grace each morning, dragging her blanket and hot cocoa, plopping beside her with endless requests. "Can you draw a puppy? Can you draw me with wings? Can you draw Daddy with a silly hat?" Grace would laugh and sketch, her hands quick and gentle. But one morning, Kelly sat quietly, hands folded, watching Grace without saying a word. Grace didn't ask why. She just started drawing. That night, Michael came home to Kelly, running into his arms. "Grace made you something," she said proudly, "but you can't see it until after dinner." Later, in the sunroom, Grace was tidying up her sketches when Kelly handed Michael a folded piece of paper. He opened it and froze. It was a drawing of him and Kelly beside the Rockefeller Christmas tree. He was kneeling, tying her shoelace, and Kelly looked up at him with a tiny hand on his shoulder. Warm lights surrounded them, like a quiet halo. Michael stared at it for a long time. "I didn't even know you saw that," he murmured. Grace, standing near the window, said softly, "I notice things people forget to see." He looked at her, really looked, and something passed between them, silent, honest, unspoken. 2 nights later, over breakfast, Michael looked up from his coffee. "There's a charity gala this weekend. Would you go with me?" Grace blinked. "Me?" He gave a small smile. "You'd be saving me from a lot of awkward conversations." She hesitated. "I don't exactly have a dress for something like that." "We can take care of that," he said simply. On the night of the event, Grace wore a deep green dress, simple, elegant, her hair curled loosely around her face. The only jewelry she wore was a small silver pendant that Kelly had begged her to borrow. They stepped into the grand ballroom, and Grace instantly felt every eye on her. She stayed close to the edge of the room, quiet, observing. Michael introduced her to a few people. She smiled politely, nodded where needed, but mostly kept to herself. Later, standing near the dessert table, she held a glass of wine she hadn't touched, when a woman's voice cut through the noise. "Well, if it isn't the Christmas charity case turned date." Grace turned slowly. The woman was tall, polished, someone clearly from Michael's circle. Her smile was syrupy and sharp. "I knew I recognized you," she said. "You were the one on 48th and 7th, right? Sleeping on a bench with a baby. Sweet little rags to riches story. Bet it makes for great press." Grace's fingers tightened around her glass, but her face stayed calm. She didn't answer. She simply turned and walked out into the snow. Michael found her minutes later, standing beneath a street lamp as snowflakes gathered in her hair. She didn't turn when he approached. "You didn't have to come after me," she said quietly. "Yes, I did." He slipped off his coat and wrapped it over her shoulders. "You didn't deserve that," he said gently. "You never have to explain yourself to anyone, not anymore." She finally looked at him. Her eyes, so often guarded, were open, soft. And in that moment, Michael wasn't the man who had rescued her. He wasn't a CEO or a millionaire. He was simply someone who saw her, really saw her. And for the first time, she let herself be seen. The late afternoon sun cast a soft golden light across Central Park, where families strolled through the snow-linked paths and children laughed, tossing snowballs beneath bare trees. Grace pushed the stroller slowly, one hand clutching the handle, the other wrapped tightly around her coat. Noah was bundled up and fast asleep, his tiny hat slipping slightly to one side. The soft hum of the city around her felt oddly peaceful, until she heard a familiar voice. A voice she hadn't heard since the day she left home. Grace. Her body went cold before she turned. There, standing just off the path near a bench, was her mother. Same pristine posture, same tailored coat, same eyes, sharp, unreadable. Grace's breath caught in her throat. Her mother took one look at Noah in the stroller, then back at Grace with barely concealed judgment. "You should not be here," her mother said flatly. "Not in public, not like this." Grace said nothing, her jaw tightening. "You chose shame," her mother continued, voice like ice, "so do not expect love." Then, without another word, the woman turned and walked away, heels clicking against the pavement, disappearing into the crowd. Grace stood frozen, not shocked, not surprised, just hollow. That night, the penthouse was quiet, except for the soft crackling of the fireplace. Grace had said little since she returned. She had fed Noah, bathed him, tucked him into bed. Now she sat silently in the corner of the living room, lost in thought. Michael was upstairs finishing a call, but Kelly was still awake, playing with crayons and paper near the tree. After a few minutes, Grace heard her voice. "Look, Grace," Kelly said proudly, "it's your house." Grace looked over. In Kelly's tiny hands was a drawing she had taken from Grace's sketchbook, a watercolor painting Grace had done days earlier but never showed anyone. In it there was a small, cozy home. Warm light glowed from the windows. Snow covered the roof. In front of the house stood 4 figures: Grace, Michael, Kelly, and baby Noah, all holding hands beneath a tall Christmas tree strung with golden lights. Kelly pointed at each figure in turn. "That's me. That's baby Noah. That's Daddy. And that's you." She smiled up at Grace, completely certain. "This is our family now, right?" Grace didn't speak. Her throat burned. Her chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with pain, at least not the kind she was used to. She crossed the room slowly and knelt beside Kelly, pulling her and the drawing into her arms. She held Kelly tightly, her hand shaking as she brushed a kiss across the child's forehead. Then she reached out and pulled Noah's blanket from the stroller nearby, hugging both children close, her heart overflowing. And for the first time, she cried. Not from rejection, not from loneliness, but because, in that quiet room filled with warmth and firelight, she finally felt like she belonged. She wasn't alone anymore. A few moments later, Michael stepped into the room. He stopped when he saw her on the floor, holding both children, her shoulders trembling in silence. The painting lay beside her, and the firelight shimmered against the tears on her cheeks. He walked over slowly, crouched down, and rested a hand gently over hers. "You've carried the world on your shoulders," he said softly. "Let someone carry you now." Grace looked up at him, eyes red, cheeks wet, but smiling for the first time through the pain. And in that single moment, something shifted between them. Not pity, not rescue, but recognition of two people who had known loss, who had learned to live with it, and who, for the first time in a long time, didn't have to do it alone. The storm rolled in fast that night. Snow swirled outside the penthouse windows, blanketing the city in white silence. Inside, the fireplace flickered warmly, but the peace didn't last. It started with a soft whimper. Grace rushed to the nursery where Noah lay restless, his tiny arms twitching under the blanket. His cheeks were flushed a deep, alarming red, and sweat clung to his hairline. When she touched his forehead, her heart dropped. He was burning up. "Noah?" she whispered, lifting him into her arms. His body was hot, too hot. His eyes fluttered but didn't open. "Noah, baby, look at me." Panic set in. She grabbed the thermometer, fumbled it into place. 104.2 DFF. She gasped, pressing him closer to her chest. "Michael!" she shouted, her voice cracking. He appeared in seconds, still buttoning the cuff of his dress shirt. He had been getting ready for a midnight video call, something high stakes with investors in Tokyo. But the look on Grace's face stopped him cold. "She's burning up," she said, her voice shaking. "He won't wake up. Michael, I don't know what to do." Michael took one look at Noah's limp frame and didn't ask another question. 10 minutes later, the Range Rover tore through the snowy streets of Manhattan, tires crunching over slush and ice. Michael's knuckles were white against the steering wheel. Grace sat in the back, cradling Noah, whispering his name over and over, as if the sound of her voice could anchor him to this world. "Please, baby, please stay with me." Kelly had stayed behind with Margaret. Michael hadn't even bothered to explain the canceled meeting. He had simply tossed his phone aside and said, Tell them I'm not coming. My family needs me." The hospital waiting room was cold and too bright. The receptionist spoke in hushed tones. A nurse whisked Noah from Grace's arms, while another guided them toward a curtained room. Grace followed, dazed, until her knees buckled into the nearest chair. Michael remained standing, watching through the glass pane in the door as the pediatric team hovered over the tiny crib. And then he heard a soft breath beside him. Grace had fallen asleep, her head tilted to the side, dark circles under her eyes. Exhaustion had finally won. Michael turned. He reached into his coat and gently placed it over her shoulders. Then, with the softest touch, he pushed a lock of hair behind her ear. She stirred, but did not wake. He knelt beside her. "You're safe now," he whispered. "And so is he." He turned back toward the window, staring at the tiny boy now wrapped in medical blankets, an oxygen mask gently placed over his nose. Michael walked into the room, pulled up a stool and sat beside the crib. The machines beeped steadily. Noah looked even smaller now, his hand barely the size of Michael's thumb. Michael reached out and took the baby's hand in his own. It fit perfectly. He sat like that for a long time. He didn't speak, didn't move. He just stayed, holding on, as if by sheer presence alone he could anchor Noah back to health. Not once did he think about the meeting he had missed. Not once did he regret it. Because in that moment, it didn't matter if Noah was his by blood. What mattered was that he was his by choice. Hours passed. The snow outside continued to fall in thick silence. Grace stirred awake, eyes fluttering open to the sterile lights above her. She looked around in a daze and then spotted them. Michael, asleep now, sitting in the hard plastic chair beside Noah's bed, his head resting against the wall, one arm still draped protectively over the crib. She covered her mouth with one hand, the tears coming fast and quiet. Not because she was afraid, but because for the first time since Noah was born, someone had stayed. The days after Noah's fever broke felt like waking from a long, dark dream. He was back to his babbling, smiling self, and Grace barely let him out of her arms. Relief slowly replaced fear. The hospital stay had shaken her, but something deeper had stayed with her. Michael had stayed without question or hesitation. That kind of loyalty was something she had never known. One crisp morning, as the snow outside began to melt into slush, Grace stood in the kitchen making coffee. Her voice was calm, but sure. "I should start looking for work." Michael looked up. "You don't have to rush." "I want to," she replied. "I need to earn my way." He nodded, recognizing something in her tone, a quiet strength. Grace didn't survive by depending. She survived by standing. He didn't press further, but something in his mind had already shifted. 2 weeks later, he took her to a small art gallery tucked between shops on the Upper East Side. The sign above the door read, "Miller & Co. Art Studio." She stared. "Miller?" she asked softly. "Just go in," he said with a small smile. Inside, golden lights bathed the walls. Jazz music played low, and every piece of art hanging inside was hers. Sketches, watercolors, studies of the city and people. And there, under a spotlight, was the painting of Michael, tying Kelly's shoelace, beneath the Christmas tree. "I don't understand," Grace whispered. "I remembered something you said," Michael replied. "That you didn't just want to paint, you wanted to share what you see. So I bought this place. It's yours." Her voice trembled. "Michael, I can't accept this." "You already did," he said gently. "Every time you picked up a pencil, every time you saw what others missed." People began arriving, friends, locals, supporters. Champagne glasses clinked. Grace stood near the corner, overwhelmed, her heart racing. Then Michael stepped forward to address the room. The crowd hushed. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began. "It's not every day we get to witness something as rare as this, not just talent, but true heart." He turned to Grace. This is Grace Miller, the artist, the mother, and the woman who reminded me what love really is. The silence that followed was complete. Grace stood still, tears welling. She had never been seen this way, not as someone to fix, not as a charity case, but as someone worthy. Slowly applause spread across the room, growing louder. Grace felt something rise inside her, break loose from years of being unseen. Tears streamed down her cheeks, not from pain, not from shame, but from recognition and belonging. Later that night, long after the guests had gone, Grace stood in the gallery, alone, gazing at her painting. Michael stepped quietly beside her. "I meant every word," he said. She turned to him, heart full. He stepped closer. "You gave, even when you had nothing. You made a home for your son. You reminded me what it means to feel. That's not something people just do." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why me?" He smiled, warm and steady. "Because you never asked to be seen, but you let me see you anyway." And this time, when she leaned into him, it wasn't with fear. It was with love. It was with trust. It was home. The snow fell lightly, like confetti from the clouds, dusting the trees and hedges of the garden in a gentle shimmer of white. It was Christmas Day, exactly 1 year since that night at the bus stop, and everything had changed. The backyard of the Carter home had been transformed into a winter wonderland. Twinkling lights lined the wooden fence, and a fire pit crackled softly nearby. A long table was set with art supplies, brushes, palettes, paints, and thick paper. Kelly had insisted that this Christmas, instead of gifts, they would all paint memories. So that was what they were doing. Michael sat beside Grace on the bench, a warm plaid blanket thrown over their laps. Noah, now just over a year old, sat nestled between them, giggling as he smeared blue paint across his little fingers. Kelly stood at the table, tongue poking out slightly as she concentrated on drawing a house with 4 stick figures under a Christmas tree, one taller, one with curls, one with a ponytail, and one very small with a big smile. Grace glanced at her daughter's work, a soft laugh slipping from her lips. "You're getting really good, you know." "I learned from the best," Kelly said proudly, without even looking up. Grace smiled, her cheeks flushed pink in the winter air, her golden hair catching the last rays of the afternoon sun. The light danced around her, making her look like something out of the very stories she used to only dream about. Michael turned to look at her, and for a moment he forgot everything else: the business meetings, the losses, the years of loneliness. All he could see was this: Grace, radiant with joy, Noah, safe and warm in his arms, Kelly, laughing under the sky. The kind of peace that doesn't come from perfection, but from healing. Then Kelly's voice broke through the quiet. "Daddy," Michael looked up. "Are we a family now?" The question hung in the air for a moment, soft, simple, but echoing so much more than it seemed. He looked at Grace, at Noah, at the little girl who had asked that question once before, long ago, pointing at a stranger on a bench and unknowingly changing all their lives. He pulled them all closer, Grace against his side, Noah cradled to his chest, Kelly wrapping her arms around them. He smiled, voice steady and full. "Forever, sweetheart. Forever." As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the snowy yard, the 4 of them stayed close, brushes in hand, hearts in sync. There had once been 4 broken pieces, scattered in different places across the city. A grieving man, a lost young woman, a motherless child, and a baby born into uncertainty. But somehow, by grace or fate or something in between, those pieces had found one another. And now they fit. Perfectly. Together they painted a picture of home. Sometimes, the most unexpected moments lead us to the people who were meant to change our lives. Michael, Grace, Kelly, and little Noah weren't perfect, but together they found something far more powerful than perfection: belonging, love, and healing. This Christmas, may we all remember that kindness is never wasted, and that sometimes a single act of compassion can build an entire family. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories, where we bring you true tales and heartwarming fiction that heal, inspire, and remind us what really matters. Until next time, take care and keep your heart open. Subscribe now to Soul-Stirring Stories for more stories that touch the soul.
Millionaire watched 20 experts fail. Then a 6-year-old orphan girl solved a 3.2B problem in 10 seconds, leaving him shocked and changing her life forever. Before we dive into this moving story of sadness and isolation, drop a comment with your location and subscribe for more emotional content. The explosion shattered the morning silence like thunder from hell itself, sending glass fragments cascading from the 47th floor of the Davidson Industries Tower in a deadly rain that sparkled like diamonds in the early sunlight. Inside his private office, tech billionaire Marcus Davidson stood frozen in absolute horror, staring at the smoldering remains of what had been his most prized possession. A $3.2 billion quantum security vault that had just self-destructed in a spectacular display of sparks. Twisted metal and technological devastation that defied all logic and engineering expectations. The vault had been more than just a storage system. It was the crown jewel of his empire, containing decades of revolutionary research, breakthrough technologies, and most importantly, the only existing cure for his daughter Emma's rare genetic condition. Now it lay in ruins, its impenetrable walls somehow intact, but its access systems completely destroyed, leaving everything inside sealed behind digital barriers that seemed impossible to breach. "Sir, are you injured?" His assistant, Patricia Williams, rushed in through the smoke-filled doorway, her face pale with terror as she navigated through the debris scattered across the imported Italian marble floor like a minefield of destruction. The acrid smell of burning circuits filled the air like a toxic fog, mixing with the scent of melted plastic and superheated metal, while emergency alarms blared throughout the building with deafening intensity that seemed to echo the chaos in Marcus's heart. Security personnel flooded the office within minutes, their heavy boots crunching on broken glass as they secured the perimeter with military precision. Fire suppression systems engaged automatically, filling the room with clouds of chemical retardant that made breathing difficult and visibility nearly impossible. Through it all, Marcus stood transfixed, unable to process the magnitude of what had just occurred. Marcus's hands trembled uncontrollably as he surveyed the devastation that surrounded him like a nightmare made horrifyingly real. 20 years of his life's work, stored in that supposedly impenetrable vault. Revolutionary technology that could change the world forever, medical breakthroughs that could save millions of lives, and most crucially, the genetic therapy that represented Emma's only hope for survival. All of it now locked away behind barriers that his own genius had created but could no longer control. "The backup systems," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the chaos that engulfed them like a living thing. His throat felt raw from the smoke, and his words came out as a desperate rasp. "Please tell me the backup systems engaged properly. Tell me we didn't lose everything." Patricia's silence was deafening, more terrifying than any scream could have been. She shook her head slowly, tears forming in her eyes as the devastating reality began to sink in with crushing weight. Her hands shook as she consulted her tablet, reading reports that seemed to grow worse with each passing second. The quantum encryption matrix, it's completely fried beyond any hope of conventional repair. The fail-safe mechanisms triggered a total lockdown protocol that we've never seen before. Everything inside is now sealed behind a digital wall, so complex that our best engineers are calling it mathematically impossible to breach using current technology. The words hit Marcus like physical blows, each syllable driving home the horrifying reality of his situation. "Get me Dr. Harrison," he interrupted, his voice gaining strength through sheer desperation as his mind raced through possibilities, connections, and potential solutions. "Get me every cryptographer in the country, every security expert we know, every genius who's ever worked with quantum encryption. I don't care what it costs or how long it takes. Offer them anything, money, research partnerships, whatever they want." As firefighters stormed into the office with their heavy equipment and emergency protocols, their faces grim behind protective masks, Marcus stared at the vault's twisted metal frame with growing horror and desperate determination. The outer structure remained intact, a testament to the incredible engineering that had gone into its construction. But the access systems were completely destroyed, leaving no conventional way to reach what lay inside. Inside that impenetrable chamber lay not just his fortune or his business empire, but something infinitely more precious: the cure for his daughter Emma's rare genetic condition, a revolutionary treatment that existed nowhere else in the world. The research had taken 15 years to develop, involving collaboration with the world's leading geneticists, and represented the only hope for Emma's survival. Without access to that research, Emma had less than 6 months to live, and every second that passed brought her closer to a fate he absolutely refused to accept. The billionaire's empire, built over decades of innovation and calculated risks, meant nothing if he couldn't save his little girl. But first, he had to crack a code that his own brilliant engineers claimed was mathematically impossible to break. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had created the perfect security system, designed to be absolutely impenetrable, and now it might cost him everything that truly mattered in his life. Standing in the wreckage of his office, surrounded by the chaos of emergency responders and the acrid smell of destruction, Marcus Davidson faced the greatest challenge of his life. He was a man who had built an empire by solving impossible problems. But now he faced a puzzle that seemed to have no solution, and his daughter's life hung in the balance. Dr. Benjamin Harrison, MIT's most celebrated cryptographer and a man whose reputation for solving impossible puzzles was legendary throughout the academic and technological worlds, pushed his wire-rimmed glasses up his nose and sighed deeply, his exhaustion evident in every line of his weathered face. Dark circles under his eyes told the story of countless sleepless nights, and his usually immaculate appearance had given way to rumpled clothes and unkempt hair that spoke of a man pushed beyond his limits. "Marcus, I've been at this for 72 hours straight, running every algorithm I know, and several I invented specifically for this problem," he said, his voice hoarse from exhaustion and frustration. "The quantum encryption isn't just complex, it's revolutionary, beyond anything I've encountered in 30 years of cryptography and computer science. Your engineers created something that adapts and evolves every nanosecond, learning from each attempt to breach it and becoming stronger with every failed attack." The temporary office Marcus had set up 3 floors below the disaster zone had become a command center of desperate activity. Whiteboards covered every wall, filled with complex mathematical equations, quantum theory diagrams, and algorithmic approaches that had all led to dead ends. Cables snaked across the floor, connecting multiple computer systems that hummed with constant processing power, their screens displaying streams of data that represented humanity's best efforts to crack the impossible code. Marcus paced frantically around the space, his expensive Italian shoes wearing a path in the carpet as his mind refused to accept defeat. The vault remained sealed above them, its digital locks growing more sophisticated by the hour, like a living thing that learned and adapted with frightening intelligence. "There has to be a way, Ben. I refuse to accept that it's impossible. My daughter's life depends on getting into that vault. 20 specialists have failed, but there has to be someone, somewhere, who can find a solution to this nightmare. The team of experts surrounding them represented the pinnacle of human intelligence in the field of encryption and quantum computing. Dr. Sarah Chen from Stanford had flown in specifically to tackle the quantum matrix problem. Professor James Mitchell from Oxford had contributed his expertise in advanced cryptography. Even Dr. Yuki Tanaka from Tokyo University, considered the world's leading expert in quantum algorithms, had joined their desperate effort via secure video connection. The mathematical probability of cracking this code is virtually zero, Dr. Harrison interrupted, his voice heavy with professional defeat and personal frustration. The quantum matrix creates billions of possible combinations every second, each one more complex than the last. It's not just generating random combinations, it's creating new mathematical relationships and cryptographic protocols that didn't exist before. It would take our most advanced supercomputers approximately 47 years to run through all the current possibilities, and by then the system will have evolved exponentially beyond our current understanding of mathematics and computing. The weight of those words settled over Marcus like a suffocating blanket of despair. 47 years. Emma didn't have 47 days, let alone years. Her rare genetic condition was aggressive and unforgiving, and without the specialized treatment locked in the vault, her young body would begin shutting down within months. He slumped into his leather chair, feeling older than his 45 years, as the reality of his situation crashed over him in devastating waves. Dr. Chen looked up from her computer terminal, her expression grim. We've tried brute force attacks, algorithmic predictions, quantum tunneling protocols, and even attempted to reverse engineer the original programming. The system seems to anticipate every approach we take and adapts accordingly. It's almost as if it's alive, learning from our attempts and becoming stronger with each failure. Professor Mitchell nodded grimly from his position at another workstation. The encryption doesn't just protect the contents, it actively fights back against intrusion attempts. I've never seen anything like it in decades of security research. It's not just a lock, it's an intelligent guardian that seems to understand the value of what it's protecting. A soft knock interrupted their grim conversation, cutting through the tension like a knife. Patricia peered through the door, her expression uncertain and confused, carrying something in her demeanor that suggested the unexpected. Mr. Davidson, there's a situation downstairs in the main lobby. The police brought someone who claims she can help with your vault problem. It's quite unusual, sir, and frankly I'm not sure what to make of it. Marcus's laugh was bitter and hollow, the sound of a man pushed beyond his breaking point and grasping at any possible straw. Patricia, we've had fortune tellers, con artists, self-proclaimed geniuses, conspiracy theorists, and every delusional person in the city trying to get near that vault since news of the incident broke. I don't have time for another charlatan promising miracles they can't deliver. The parade of supposed experts and opportunists had been endless and exhausting. Religious leaders claiming divine intervention could open the vault, street magicians insisting they understood the secrets of technology, and dozens of individuals who seemed to believe that confidence alone could substitute for actual knowledge. Each interruption had cost precious time and emotional energy that Marcus couldn't afford to waste. Sir, Patricia's voice was barely a whisper, her words carrying an odd mixture of confusion and wonder that made everyone in the room look up from their work. It's a 6-year-old girl. She walked here alone from St. Mary's Children's Home and told security she could open your vault in 10 seconds. She's different, Mr. Davidson. There's something about her that's hard to explain. The room fell silent except for the distant hum of the building's ventilation system and the soft clicking of computer keyboards as processing continued in the background. Dr. Harrison removed his glasses, cleaning them slowly as his scientific mind struggled to process this information. A child? Marcus, surely you don't think a 6-year-old could possibly understand quantum encryption mathematics? This isn't a fairy tale where magic solves complex problems. But Marcus was already moving toward the door. Something indefinable pulling him forward, like an invisible thread of hope. Emma's face flashed through his mind, his brilliant, brave daughter, who had always seen solutions where others saw impossibilities, who had approached problems with a unique perspective that often surprised even him. Bring her up immediately, if there's even the smallest chance. Dr. Chen looked skeptical. Marcus, with all due respect, we're dealing with quantum physics and advanced cryptography here. A child couldn't possibly have the mathematical background necessary to understand what we're facing. Maybe that's exactly the point, Marcus said quietly, his hand on the doorknob. Maybe we've been thinking about this all wrong. Lucy Chen sat perfectly still in the oversized leather chair in Marcus's temporary office, her small legs dangling inches from the floor like a porcelain doll positioned in furniture made for giants. Her clothes were clean but obviously second-hand, a faded blue dress with careful patches that spoke of loving care despite limited resources, and worn sneakers that had seen better days, but were polished with evident pride and attention. Despite her humble appearance, her dark eyes held an intensity that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat, a depth of intelligence and understanding that seemed impossible in someone so young. The contrast between this small child and the room full of brilliant adults was striking. Where the experts looked haggard and defeated, Lucy appeared calm and composed, as if she possessed some secret knowledge that gave her confidence in the face of what others deemed impossible. Her posture was perfect, her attention focused, and there was something about her presence that seemed to change the very atmosphere of the room. "Mr. Davidson," she said in a clear, confident voice that seemed far too mature for her 6-year-old frame, each word carefully chosen and precisely delivered with a formality that was both charming and slightly unsettling. "I know you don't believe a kid like me can help with something so important and complicated. All these smart adults have been trying for days, and I'm just a little girl from the children's home. But I've been studying your vault's quantum encryption pattern since I saw the news report this morning on the old television in our common room at St. Mary's." Dr. Harrison leaned forward, intrigued despite his scientific skepticism and professional caution. The child's vocabulary and sentence structure were remarkably advanced for her age, suggesting an intelligence that might indeed be extraordinary. "Young lady, do you understand what quantum encryption actually means? It's not something they teach in elementary schools, and most adults find it difficult to grasp even the basic concepts." Lucy's smile was patient, almost sad, carrying a weight of knowledge and experience that seemed far beyond her years. "It means the lock changes its combination faster than most people can think, Dr. Harrison. The numbers and patterns shift constantly, creating new possibilities every fraction of a second. But patterns exist in everything, even in the most complex systems that seem random. Even in chaos, there are rhythms and mathematical relationships that most people overlook because they're thinking too hard instead of feeling the natural flow of the system." Marcus knelt beside her chair, studying her face with growing fascination. Something about this child reminded him powerfully of Emma. The same fearless intelligence, the same way of seeing the world through a completely different lens than other people, the same ability to find simple solutions to complex problems. "Lucy, where did you learn about encryption and computer programming? This isn't typical knowledge for someone your age, even for children who show exceptional academic ability. At the children's home, there's an old computer in the library that nobody else uses because it's slow and outdated and doesn't run the games the other kids want to play. I taught myself programming when I was 4 years old because books and numbers made more sense to me than trying to make friends with the other children." Her voice carried a weight of loneliness that pierced Marcus's heart like a dagger, speaking of a brilliant mind trapped in circumstances that didn't nurture or understand her gifts. "Mathematics makes sense to me in ways that Other things don't, she continued, her eyes distant as if remembering countless hours spent alone with numbers and equations. People are complicated and unpredictable, but numbers and patterns are honest. They don't lie or change their minds or leave you behind. When I work with code, I can see the logic underneath everything, like looking at the skeleton inside a body. But sweetheart, Patricia interjected gently, her maternal instincts clearly touched by this unusual child who seemed so isolated despite her remarkable abilities. 20 of the world's brightest experts have tried for days without success. These are people with advanced degrees from the best universities, decades of experience with the most sophisticated technology available. How could you possibly succeed where they've failed? The question hung in the air like a challenge. And everyone in the room found themselves leaning forward, waiting for her response. Dr. Chen had stopped typing, Professor Mitchell had turned away from his equations, and even Dr. Tanaka on the video screen seemed to be paying closer attention to this unexpected development. "Because they're thinking like adults," Lucy interrupted, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face, holding his gaze with startling directness and unwavering confidence. They're trying to outsmart the system with brute force and complex algorithms, throwing more and more complicated solutions at a problem that might not need complicated answers. But what if the solution isn't about being smarter or having more computing power or knowing more advanced mathematics? What if it's about thinking differently, about approaching the problem from an angle that experienced minds would never consider because they're too educated to see the simple truth? Marcus felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the building's air conditioning. This wasn't the innocent babbling of a delusional child seeking attention or trying to insert herself into an adult situation she didn't understand. This was something else entirely, something that defied every logical explanation, but felt strangely, impossibly right in a way that spoke to his deepest instincts as both a father and an innovator. "Sometimes," Lucy continued, her voice taking on an almost mystical quality, "the hardest locks are opened by the smallest keys. Sometimes the most sophisticated systems have the simplest weaknesses. Your vault isn't just a machine, Mr. Davidson. It's something more, something that understands things that computers usually don't understand." The room had become completely silent, every adult hanging on the words of this extraordinary child who spoke with a wisdom that seemed to come from somewhere far beyond her 6 years of life. The elevator ride to the 47th floor felt eternal, each floor passing like a countdown to either triumph or devastating disappointment that would seal Emma's fate forever. The enclosed space seemed to pulse with tension as Lucy stood between Marcus and Dr. Harrison, her small hand firmly gripping a worn notebook filled with hand-drawn mathematical equations that looked surprisingly sophisticated despite their childish handwriting and the obvious use of crayons and pencils rather than professional mathematical notation. Security guards flanked them on both sides, their faces stern but curious as they accompanied this unprecedented group to what had become the most secure location in the building. Everyone was tense with anticipation and barely concealed skepticism about this unprecedented situation. But there was also something else, a strange sense of hope that seemed to emanate from the small girl at the center of their desperate mission. "Lucy," Marcus said softly, his voice heavy with the weight of everything that hung in the balance, every word carefully chosen because he needed her to understand the magnitude of what they were attempting. "I need you to understand something crucial before we go any further. Inside that vault is information that could save my daughter's life. Emma is very sick with a rare genetic condition that attacks her immune system, and without access to the research locked inside, she might not have much time left. The doctors have tried everything conventional medicine has to offer, but the cure we developed is the only thing that can help her now." "It will work," Lucy said with quiet certainty that seemed to come from some deep, unshakable place within her small frame, a confidence that was both reassuring and slightly unsettling in its absolute nature. Mr. Davidson, your engineers made the system too perfect, too logical, too focused on keeping bad people out instead of letting good people in. Perfect systems have perfect weaknesses, and sometimes the most sophisticated locks can only be opened by the simplest keys that nobody thinks to try. As the elevator doors opened with a soft ding that seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence, they were greeted by the sight of the destroyed office bathed in harsh emergency lighting that cast long shadows across the devastation. The vault stood in the center like a metallic monument to impossibility, its surface unmarked by the explosion that had devastated everything around it. A testament to the incredible engineering that had gone into its construction, its digital display cycling through millions of encryption codes per second in a hypnotic dance of numbers and symbols that hurt to look at directly. The contrast was striking. The office around the vault was destroyed, with broken glass, twisted metal, and burn marks covering every surface, while the vault itself remained pristine and untouched, as if it existed in its own protected dimension. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows that moved and shifted with each flicker, creating an almost supernatural atmosphere around the technological marvel that held their hopes and fears. Dr. Harrison immediately pulled up the diagnostic screens on his laptop, his fingers flying over the keyboard with practiced efficiency as streams of data filled multiple windows on his screen. The quantum matrix is currently generating approximately 2.3 billion possible combinations every second, he reported, his voice taking on the clinical tone of a scientist presenting data. The pattern randomizes completely every few seconds, making it theoretically impossible to predict or track using conventional computational methods. The processing power required to crack this would exceed anything currently available, even using the most advanced quantum computers in existence. Every 4.7 seconds, Lucy corrected calmly, approaching the vault without hesitation or fear, her small footsteps echoing in the damaged space with a confidence that seemed to belie her age and the magnitude of the challenge before them. But there's a gap, Dr. Harrison. A tiny pause between cycles where the system resets its base algorithm and returns to its original parameters for just a fraction of a second. Most people would miss it because they're focused on the complexity and the speed. But I've been watching the pattern since I got here, and I can see the rhythm underneath all the chaos. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs as he watched this extraordinary child study his impenetrable vault with the same casual confidence most kids would show examining a simple jigsaw puzzle. The incongruity was overwhelming. This small girl in her patched dress, standing before a $3 billion quantum security system that had defeated the combined efforts of 20 brilliant minds, acting as if she were simply looking at a door that needed the right key. "How could you possibly know that specific timing?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder and disbelief. "Our own engineers, the people who built this system, didn't catch that detail. We have diagnostic equipment worth millions of dollars, and none of it detected the pattern you're describing." Lucy turned to face him, her young face serious beyond her years, carrying an expression of someone who had seen too much disappointment to allow herself false hope, but who nonetheless believed in the possibility of miracles. "Because I've been watching the pattern since I arrived, Mr. Davidson, not just with my eyes, but with my heart. Your vault isn't just locked, it's trying to communicate. It's trying to tell you something important, something about love and protection and the real reason it was built, but everyone's been too busy trying to break it to actually listen to what it's saying." She placed her small hand on the vault's surface with surprising reverence, as if she were touching something sacred rather than a machine. Her eyes closed in concentration as she seemed to listen to music only she could hear, her breathing becoming slow and regular as she entered a state of focus that was remarkable for someone so young. The room held its collective breath as the 6-year-old orphan prepared to attempt what 20 brilliant minds had failed to achieve, their hopes and fears hanging in the air like electricity before a storm. Every adult present found themselves believing, despite all logic and reason, that somehow this child might possess the key to unlocking not just the vault, but the future itself. "Wait!" Dr. Harrison whispered urgently, his laptop screen suddenly showing erratic readings that made no scientific sense according to everything they understood about quantum mechanics and digital encryption. "Something's changing in the quantum field fluctuations. The oscillations they're actually slowing down. This shouldn't be possible according to everything we understand about the system's core programming and quantum physics principles." The diagnostic equipment throughout the room began registering changes that defied conventional explanation. Energy readings that had been chaotic and unpredictable for days were beginning to stabilize into recognizable patterns. Temperature sensors detected subtle shifts in the vault's surface heat signature, and electromagnetic field detectors were picking up rhythms that seemed almost organic in their regularity. Lucy kept her eyes closed, her small hand still pressed against the vault's cool metal surface, with gentle determination that spoke of absolute faith in something greater than technology or mathematical formulas. "The system recognizes innocence," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the hum of electronics and the breathing of the adults who surrounded her in fascinated silence. "It was programmed to respond to pure intention, not complex algorithms or brute force attacks. Your daughter understood something that all the experts missed when they were building their defenses." Marcus watched in complete amazement as the vault's frantic digital display began to stabilize, the chaotic stream of numbers gradually organizing itself into recognizable patterns that seemed to pulse with their own internal logic. The billions of combinations per second dropped to millions, then thousands, as if the system itself was calming down like a frightened animal learning to trust. "That's absolutely impossible," he breathed, his voice filled with wonder. "The system doesn't have emotional recognition protocols in its programming architecture." "Yes, it does," Lucy said, opening her eyes and looking directly at him with a gaze that seemed to see straight through to his soul. It passed all the layers of success and sophistication to the desperate father underneath. "You programmed it to protect something precious, something pure and innocent. The vault isn't just looking for the right mathematical code or the correct algorithmic sequence, Mr. Davidson. It's looking for the right heart, the right intentions, the kind of love that would move heaven and earth to protect what matters most." Patricia gasped audibly as the security monitors throughout the building began displaying the same message in bold letters that seemed to glow with their own inner light. "Pure intention protocol activated. Searching for authorized emotional signature. Love recognition system engaged." The message appeared on every screen in the building simultaneously, from the smallest tablet to the largest display monitors, as if the vault's influence was somehow spreading throughout the entire structure. Security personnel throughout the building reported the same phenomenon, creating a sense of wonder and impossibility that touched everyone who witnessed it. "I don't understand any of this," Dr. Harrison stammered, his scientific mind struggling desperately to process what he was witnessing through the lens of decades of training in logic and empirical observation. "There's no such protocol anywhere in the system specifications we reviewed. This goes against everything we know about quantum encryption and digital security systems. Machines don't recognize emotions. They respond to mathematics and logical commands." Dr. Chen had abandoned her computer entirely, staring at the vault with an expression of scientific wonder mixed with personal awe. "The energy signatures we're detecting don't match anything in our databases," she reported, her voice filled with excitement and confusion. "It's as if the system is operating on principles we haven't discovered yet." "Because it was hidden," Lucy explained patiently, her hand never leaving the vault as she spoke with the calm certainty of someone much older and wiser. buried so deep in the foundational code that only someone who wasn't trying to break it could find it. Your daughter helped design this security system, didn't she, Mr. Davidson? She left something special inside the programming, something that goes beyond mathematics and enters the realm of love itself. Marcus's legs nearly gave out beneath him as the full implications of her words hit him like a physical blow that took his breath away. How could this child possibly know about Emma's involvement in the vault's creation? That had been their most closely guarded secret project, something they'd worked on together during Emma's good days, when the illness gave her enough strength and clarity to focus on mathematics and programming, and the kinds of abstract problems that fascinated her brilliant mind. Emma always said the best locks were opened with love, not force, Lucy continued, tears forming in her dark eyes as she spoke with impossible knowledge that seemed to come from direct connection to something beyond normal human understanding. She left a message for you inside the vault's core programming, Mr. Davidson. A message that could only be accessed by someone who understood that some problems can't be solved with genius alone. They have to be solved with hope and pure intentions and the kind of love that refuses to accept defeat. The vault's display suddenly went completely black, and for a moment that stretched like eternity, Marcus thought they had failed and that his desperate gamble had cost them their last chance. Then, slowly, new text began to appear in soft, glowing letters that seemed to be written in Emma's own handwriting. "Welcome home, Daddy. I knew you'd find the right person to help. Love always finds a way." The words hung in the air like a benediction, and every person in the room felt the presence of something greater than technology, something that spoke to the deepest truths about love, family, and the power of hope to overcome even the most impossible obstacles. For 10 heartbeats that felt like 10 hours, the room was silent except for the soft hum of electronics and the barely audible sound of grown men and women trying not to cry as they witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about the relationship between technology and human emotion. The air itself seemed to shimmer with possibility, as if the very fabric of reality had been gently altered by the presence of something miraculous. Then, with a gentle click that seemed impossibly quiet after days of mechanical struggles and failed attempts by the world's brightest minds, the vault door began to open with the smooth precision of perfectly calibrated machinery that had been waiting patiently for exactly this moment. The sound was almost musical, like the first note of a symphony that had been written in the language of hope itself. Marcus staggered backward, his eyes wide with disbelief and overwhelming emotion, as the massive steel door swung open like the gates of heaven themselves, revealing treasures that went far beyond monetary value. "Lucy, how did you know?" he whispered, his voice breaking with the weight of gratitude and wonder. "How could you possibly have known about Emma's hidden protocols and the emotional security system she built into the quantum matrix?" "I listened," she said simply, stepping away from the vault as its contents were revealed in all their glory, bathed in soft light that seemed to come from within the chamber itself. "Sometimes the hardest problems have the simplest solutions, Mr. Davidson. Sometimes you just have to stop trying to be so smart and start trying to understand what really matters. Love speaks its own language, and children are often better at hearing it than adults who have forgotten how to believe in impossible things." Inside the vault, holographic displays flickered to life with dazzling brightness, revealing terabytes of advanced medical research that represented decades of collaborative effort. Revolutionary technologies that could change the world in ways both profound and practical, and in the center of it all, a video file labeled "For Daddy When You Need Hope Most. Play When Love Finds the Key." The holographic displays showed research into genetic therapy that was years ahead of anything currently available. Breakthrough technologies in quantum computing that would revolutionize artificial intelligence, clean energy solutions that could solve global warming, and medical devices that could cure diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia. But all of it paled in comparison to what appeared on the central screen. Emma's face appeared on the display, weak but radiating love and intelligence that filled the room with warmth, recorded just weeks before her condition had worsened dramatically, but clearly planned for exactly this moment. Her voice filled the room with the kind of warmth that had been missing for too long, carrying with it all the love and hope that a brilliant child could pour into her final gift to her father. "Hi, Daddy. If you're seeing this, it means something went wrong with our vault. But don't worry. I built a special key into the system just in case something like this happened. It can only be opened by someone with a pure heart, someone who believes in hope more than logic, someone who sees possibilities where others see only problems, and who understands that love is the most powerful force in the universe." Marcus fell to his knees on the debris-covered floor, tears streaming down his face without shame, as his daughter's beloved voice washed over him like a healing balm that touched the deepest wounds in his heart. "I hid the real access protocol where only a child would think to look, in the space between fear and faith, between desperation and hope, in the place where love lives when everything else seems impossible. I love you, Daddy, more than all the stars in the sky and all the numbers in mathematics. Save as many people as you can with what we built together. And remember that the best solutions come from the smallest hands and the biggest hearts." Lucy walked over to Marcus and gently placed her small hand on his shoulder with the wisdom of someone far beyond her 6 years, her touch carrying a comfort that seemed to flow from some inexhaustible source of compassion. "Mr. Davidson, your daughter knew you'd find a way to save her and help others too. She just needed someone small enough to fit through the cracks in an impossible problem, someone who could see love where others only saw mathematics, and who wasn't afraid to believe in miracles." Dr. Harrison was frantically scanning the vault's contents with his portable equipment, his voice shaking with excitement and scientific wonder that made him sound decades younger. "Marcus, this is absolutely extraordinary. The medical research alone could revolutionize healthcare for generations. The quantum computing advances could solve climate change, cure diseases, explore space in ways we never imagined. The breakthrough technologies stored here, this could literally change the world and save millions of lives." The displays showed cure protocols for dozens of rare genetic conditions, revolutionary cancer treatments that worked at the cellular level, artificial organs that could be grown from a patient's own DNA, and brain interface technologies that could help paralyzed patients walk again. It was a treasure trove of human advancement that represented the culmination of decades of research and billions of dollars in development. Lucy's smile was mysterious and knowing, carrying secrets far too deep for her 6 years, but somehow perfectly natural on her young face, as if she had always known that this moment would come. "Some children see patterns that adults miss, Dr. Harrison. Sometimes being forgotten by the world means you notice things that others overlook. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. And sometimes what the world calls impossible is just waiting for someone who still believes in magic." As Marcus stood on unsteady legs, clutching printouts of the medical data that would save Emma's life and potentially transform the lives of millions of others, he realized that this remarkable little girl had just changed everything, not just for his family, but potentially for the entire world. The genetic therapy protocols alone could help thousands of children with rare conditions, and the other technologies could address some of humanity's greatest challenges. But who was Lucy Chen really? And how had she known exactly what to do when the world's greatest experts had failed? How had she understood Emma's hidden programming when even the engineers who built the system had been unaware of its existence? The biggest question of all remained unspoken, but hung in the air like electricity. What other impossible problems could this extraordinary child solve? And where did her remarkable abilities truly come from? The vault was open, revealing treasures beyond imagination, But the mystery of Lucy was just beginning to unfold, promising revelations that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the relationship between innocence, intelligence, and the power of love to overcome any obstacle. The Medical Research Center at Davidson Industries had never seen activity like this in its 20-year history of groundbreaking scientific research. Within hours of opening the vault, Marcus had assembled the world's leading geneticists, oncologists, and biomedical engineers, flying them in from every corner of the globe with promises of unlimited research funding and access to revolutionary technology that could change the course of medical history. The facility buzzed with excitement as brilliant minds examined Emma's groundbreaking genetic therapy protocols with instruments worth millions of dollars. Lucy stood in the observation deck overlooking the main laboratory, her small figure dwarfed by the massive windows that provided a panoramic view of the most advanced medical facility on the planet. She watched the scientists work with an intensity that made the adults uncomfortable, her small hands pressed against the reinforced glass as she studied their every movement with an analytical precision that seemed impossible for someone her age. Her dark eyes tracked patterns and connections that seemed invisible to everyone else, processing information in ways that defied conventional understanding. "Mr. Davidson," she said quietly, her voice carrying a note of concern that immediately commanded attention from everyone in the observation area. "The cure isn't complete yet. Your daughter left something unfinished, something crucial that everyone is missing." Dr. Sarah Martinez, the lead geneticist who had flown in from Johns Hopkins specifically for this project, looked up from her high-powered microscope with deep concern etched across her weathered face. She had spent 30 years studying genetic disorders and had never encountered research as advanced as Emma's protocols. "What do you mean, Lucy?" "The protocols are detailed and comprehensive, more advanced than anything we've seen in decades of genetic research. We have everything we need to begin Emma's treatment immediately. The cellular repair sequences, the DNA modification protocols, everything is perfectly documented." "No." Lucy shook her head with certainty that belied her age, her voice carrying the same unwavering confidence that had allowed her to open an impossible vault when 20 experts had failed. Emma knew she was running out of time when she created these protocols. She was getting sicker every day, and she was afraid she might not live long enough to finish her work. She left gaps in the formula deliberately, places where only someone who understood her heart and her unique way of thinking could fill in the missing pieces. The genetic sequence is incomplete by design, like a puzzle with the most important pieces hidden in plain sight. Marcus felt his blood run cold as the implications of Lucy's words sank in like stones dropping into still water. "Incomplete, but we've already started preparing the treatment chambers, calibrating the equipment, preparing the genetic modification protocols. If something's missing from the formula..." Lucy walked to the nearest computer terminal with purpose and determination, pulling up a chair so she could reach the keyboard properly. She began typing with surprising speed and accuracy, her small fingers dancing across the keyboard as complex genetic codes and mathematical equations appeared on the screen in rapid succession. The adults gathered around, watching in amazement as she navigated through Emma's research with an intuitive understanding that seemed impossible. Emma was scared she might die before finishing the work, so she hid the final sequences in riddles and patterns that only someone who thought exactly like her could solve, Lucy explained as she worked. She encoded them in music compositions that looked like simple children's songs, but contain frequency patterns corresponding to DNA repair sequences. She hid them in mathematical poetry that appears to be abstract art, but reveals geometric codes when viewed from the right perspective. She even embedded crucial information in the spacing between words in her research notes. The geneticists gathered around the screen in complete amazement as Lucy revealed hidden layers within Emma's research that they had completely overlooked despite their advanced training and sophisticated equipment. Mathematical equations that looked like simple children's games suddenly revealed themselves as sophisticated genetic algorithms when viewed from the correct angle. Musical compositions Emma had written contained frequency patterns that corresponded perfectly to DNA repair sequences, and abstract art pieces held geometric codes that unlocked cellular regeneration protocols. "This is absolutely incredible," Dr. Martinez whispered, her voice filled with professional awe and personal wonder. "How could you possibly understand these connections? This level of genetic engineering requires years of specialized education, advanced degrees from the world's top universities, and decades of research experience in the most sophisticated laboratories." Lucy's smile was sad but determined, carrying the weight of knowledge that seemed impossible for someone so young but somehow felt completely natural in her presence. "Because Emma and I think the same way, Dr. Martinez. We both see patterns where others see chaos. We both understand that the most important things are hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone who knows how to look with their heart instead of just their analytical mind. We both believe that love and science aren't separate things. They're different ways of understanding the same truth." Emma Davidson lay pale and weak in her specially equipped hospital bed, surrounded by the most advanced medical monitoring equipment that money could buy and the combined expertise of the world's leading pediatric specialists. Despite her physical frailty, her eyes sparked with intelligence and curiosity as she studied the small girl who had become the talk of the entire medical facility and the subject of countless conversations among the nursing staff and research teams. Lucy sat quietly in the corner chair, having insisted on meeting Emma before the treatment began, saying she needed to make sure the formula was right for Emma's specific spirit and unique life force. She had been remarkably persistent about this meeting, refusing to continue her work on the genetic therapy until she could speak with Emma personally. "You're the one who opened Daddy's vault," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper but filled with genuine curiosity and deep admiration. The effort of speaking was clearly exhausting, but her interest in this remarkable child was stronger than her physical weakness. "Everyone's talking about you throughout the hospital. The nurses, the doctors, even the security guards. They say you're special, like me, but different somehow. They say you solved an impossible puzzle that 20 experts couldn't crack." Lucy nodded, moving her chair closer to the bed with careful reverence, as if approaching something sacred. "Your daddy's vault was beautiful, Emma, the way you programmed it to respond to love and pure intention instead of just cold logic. It was like poetry written in computer code, like music translated into mathematics. It was the most elegant piece of programming I've ever seen." Emma's eyes widened with surprise and pure delight, the first real animation she had shown in weeks lighting up her pale face. "You understood the emotional protocols? But those were hidden so deep in the foundational code that even I wasn't completely sure they would work when activated. The mathematical theory was solid, but I'd never tested it. How did you see them when 20 experts with decades of experience couldn't find them?" "Because we're the same kind of different," Lucy said simply, her voice carrying a wisdom that seemed to come from far beyond her 6 years of life experience. "We both see the world differently than other people. We both understand that numbers and patterns aren't just cold mathematics. They're alive, they have feelings. They tell stories about love and hope and the invisible connections between all living things in the universe." The two girls talked for hours, sharing a connection that transcended age, circumstance, and the medical crisis that had brought them together in this sterile hospital environment. Emma explained the inspiration behind her genetic research, how she had dreamed of creating treatments that would help other children like herself, kids who were trapped in failing bodies, but whose minds soared beyond normal limitations and saw possibilities that others missed. Lucy shared her own experiences with pattern recognition and intuitive problem-solving, describing the profound loneliness of being different in a world that didn't understand or appreciate unusual gifts. At the children's home, I always felt like I was speaking a different language, she confided, her voice soft with remembered pain. When I tried to explain the patterns I saw in everything, in the way rain fell, in the rhythm of people's footsteps, in the mathematics hidden in everyday conversations, the other kids looked at me like I was crazy. I know exactly what you mean, Emma replied, reaching out to take Lucy's small hand in her own. Sometimes, I think my brain works too fast for other people to follow. I see solutions to problems before I even understand what the problems are. It's like living in a world where everyone else is moving in slow motion. Lucy, Emma said suddenly. Emma said, gripping the smaller girl's hand with surprising strength, her voice taking on an urgent quality. There's something wrong with the treatment formula. Not wrong exactly, but incomplete in a crucial way that could affect everything. I was too sick to finish the final calibrations before my condition worsened dramatically. The genetic therapy will work and stop the disease progression, but it won't be permanent unless someone adjusts the cellular regeneration sequences to account for the spiritual component of healing. Lucy nodded, as if she had been expecting this revelation all along, her expression both grave and hopeful. I know. I could see the gaps in the code when I was studying it, spaces where something important was missing, but I think I understand how to fix them. Your research is brilliant, Emma, absolutely revolutionary and beyond anything the medical community has ever seen. But it needs one more element, something that goes beyond pure science into the realm of hope and the human spirit itself. The breakthrough came at 3 in the morning when Lucy suddenly sat up in the small cot the hospital staff had provided for her in Emma's room. Her eyes bright with excitement and understanding, in the dim light filtering through the medical facility's windows. The night shift nurses had grown accustomed to seeing the small girl working at all hours, her mind apparently unable to rest when faced with such an important challenge. I understand now, she whispered urgently, her voice filled with the thrill of discovery that comes when scattered pieces of a puzzle suddenly click into place. The missing piece isn't just scientific, it's deeply personal and spiritual. It has to do with what makes each person unique and worth saving. Emma stirred awake immediately, her enhanced sensitivity to her new friend's emotional state making her instantly alert, despite her physical weakness and the late hour. What do you mean, Lucy? What did you figure out? I can feel your excitement. It's like electricity in the air. Your cure works by repairing damaged DNA at the cellular level, rewriting the genetic code that controls how cells function and reproduce, Lucy explained, as she moved to the computer terminal with renewed energy. But DNA carries more than just genetic information. It carries memories, experiences, emotional imprints, the very essence of who we are as unique individuals, with our own dreams and fears and loves. The therapy will heal your body perfectly, but it needs a corresponding emotional component to heal your spirit and make the changes permanent at the deepest level. Lucy began typing rapidly, her small fingers flying across the keyboard as she accessed Emma's research files and began revealing connections that had been invisible to the adult researchers, despite their sophisticated equipment and years of training. Every person who receives this treatment needs a unique emotional key, something that connects them to their deepest source of strength, hope, and life force. It's not enough to fix the biology, you have to heal the whole person. Dr. Martinez was called in urgently from her temporary quarters in the hospital, along with the entire research team who had been working around the clock. They arrived still in their pajamas and robes, but their exhaustion evaporated when they saw what Lucy was demonstrating on the computer screens. They watched in absolute astonishment as she revealed hidden aspects of the genetic therapy that they had never considered, despite their decades of combined experience and prestigious educational backgrounds. The treatment protocols need to be personalized, not just biologically and genetically, but emotionally and spiritually. Lucy explained with remarkable clarity for someone so young, her voice taking on the confident tone of a seasoned researcher presenting groundbreaking findings. Each patient's DNA repair sequences need to be calibrated to their individual emotional signature, their personal reasons for wanting to live and thrive. For Emma, the key is her love for her father and her passionate desire to help other children who are suffering like she has suffered, Lucy continued, pulling up specific genetic sequences and showing how they could be modified to respond to Emma's unique emotional profile. For other patients, it will be different. Their connection to family, their dreams for the future, their determination to overcome adversity, their capacity for love and hope. The cure doesn't just heal the body, it strengthens the will to live and the connection to what makes life meaningful. Marcus arrived as Lucy was finishing her explanation, his face showing the exhaustion of a man who hadn't slept properly in days, but whose eyes were bright with renewed hope and amazement. Are you saying the treatment will work significantly better if we incorporate Emma's personal motivations and emotional connections into the therapy itself? Exactly, Lucy said with a smile that seemed far too wise for her age, but somehow perfectly appropriate for the magnitude of what she had discovered. The human spirit is the most powerful healing force in the universe, Mr. Davidson. Your daughter understood this instinctively, even if she didn't have time to fully develop the concept before her illness progressed. She knew that healing isn't just about fixing what's broken, it's about making the whole person stronger than they were before. 2 weeks later, Emma was sitting up in bed for the first time in months. Color returned to her cheeks and strength flowing back into her young body with each passing day, like sunlight gradually illuminating a room that had been dark for too long. The genetic therapy had worked beyond all expectations. But the emotional healing component that Lucy had added had created changes that surprised everyone, especially the girls themselves. "I can feel what you're feeling," Emma told Lucy during one of their daily conversations, her voice filled with wonder and slight concern about this unexpected development. "When you're sad or excited or confused about something, I sense it somehow, like there's an invisible connection between our minds that grows stronger every day. Is that normal? Should we be worried about it?" Lucy nodded thoughtfully, her expression serene despite the unusual nature of their experience. She had been documenting these changes in her worn notebook, trying to understand what was happening to them both. "I feel it too, Emma. When the treatment healed your DNA, it created a kind of bridge between us. We were already similar in how we think and see the world, but now we're connected in a deeper way that goes beyond normal friendship or even family bonds." Dr. Martinez had been documenting these unusual side effects with fascination and professional concern, recording every detail for future research and consulting with specialists around the world. "The girls seem to be developing some form of empathic connection," she reported to Marcus during their daily briefings in his temporary office. "It's not telepathy exactly, but they're demonstrating a remarkable ability to sense each other's emotional states and even share certain cognitive processes. They seem to complement each other's thinking in ways we've never observed before." Marcus watched his daughter and Lucy work together on a complex mathematical problem that would challenge graduate students, their minds seeming to complement each other perfectly as they reached solutions through intuitive leaps that defied conventional logic. They would start sentences that the other would finish, solve different parts of the same equation simultaneously, and demonstrate a level of intellectual synchronization that seemed almost supernatural. "Is this dangerous? Should we be concerned about these changes?" Marcus asked, his parental instincts warring with his wonder at what he was witnessing. "On the contrary," Dr. Martinez replied, her excitement evident in every word. "Their cognitive abilities seem to be enhanced exponentially by the connection. Emma's IQ has increased significantly since the treatment began. And Lucy's already remarkable problem-solving capabilities are becoming even more extraordinary. Whatever's happening between them, it appears to be profoundly beneficial for both girls. The two girls had become inseparable, spending hours discussing advanced mathematics, computer programming, quantum physics, and complex theories about the nature of consciousness and intelligence. Their conversations were recorded by researchers who struggled to understand the advanced concepts they explored with such natural ease, often discussing ideas that wouldn't be out of place in graduate-level university courses. "We're not just friends," Emma explained to her father one evening as Lucy slept peacefully in the nearby cot, her small face relaxed in peaceful dreams. "We're like two parts of the same extraordinary mind that were separated at birth and have finally found each other again. When we work together, we can solve problems that neither of us could handle alone, see patterns that are invisible when we're apart. It's like having a sister," Emma continued, her voice filled with wonder and gratitude, "but a sister who understands how my mind works, who sees the world the same way I do, who doesn't think I'm strange for being different." The answer to their growing questions came sooner than expected. Within a month of Emma's complete recovery, reports began arriving from around the world of children displaying extraordinary abilities in mathematics, pattern recognition, and intuitive problem-solving. Dr. Martinez's published research on the genetic therapy had included detailed mentions of Lucy's contributions, sparking intense interest from researchers studying gifted children globally and creating a network of communication between institutions that had never collaborated before. "There's a 7-year-old girl in Tokyo who solved a quantum physics problem that had stumped university professors for months," Patricia reported as she brought Marcus the latest batch of messages and emails from around the world. "A 9-year-old boy in London who developed a new encryption algorithm that cybersecurity experts can't crack even with their most sophisticated equipment. A 6-year-old in Sao Paulo who predicted earthquake patterns with unprecedented accuracy, potentially saving thousands of lives." Emma and Lucy sat together in Marcus's office, both now healthy and more brilliant than ever, their enhanced cognitive abilities allowing them to process information at remarkable speeds, while maintaining the emotional wisdom that made them special. They had been studying the reports from around the world, making connections that the adult researchers had missed. "They're like us," Lucy said with absolute certainty, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had found her tribe. "They think in patterns and see connections that other people miss. But most of them are probably confused and lonely, just like I was before I found you and Emma. They probably don't understand why they're different or how to use their gifts. We have to help them," Emma added, her voice filled with determination and compassion that reflected her deep understanding of what it meant to feel isolated by exceptional abilities. "The same way Lucy helped save my life by seeing what everyone else missed, we can help these children develop their abilities and use them to solve important problems that could benefit everyone." Marcus looked at his daughter, now healthy and more brilliant than ever, and at Lucy, the remarkable little girl who had changed everything. "What are you suggesting? Some kind of special school for extraordinarily gifted children?" "More than a school," Lucy replied, her eyes bright with possibility and vision. "A place where children like us can work together on projects that could help heal the world. We could develop new medical treatments, solve environmental problems, create technologies that make life better for everyone. We could prove that being different isn't a weakness, it's humanity's greatest strength." The idea was both thrilling and daunting in its scope and potential impact. Marcus had the financial resources to create such an institution, and the genetic therapy research could provide the foundation for understanding and enhancing these unusual abilities. But bringing together children with such extraordinary capabilities would also present unprecedented challenges and responsibilities. "There's something else," Emma said quietly, her voice taking on the tone she used when discussing her most important discoveries. Lucy and I have been working on the genetic therapy research, and we think we understand why some children develop these enhanced pattern recognition abilities. It's related to specific genetic markers that affect brain development, markers that can be activated under certain stress conditions. You mean these abilities aren't just random? Marcus asked, his mind racing with the implications of what his daughter was suggesting. Not random at all, Lucy confirmed, her voice filled with the excitement of scientific discovery. They're part of human evolution, dormant capabilities that emerge when children face significant challenges and have the right genetic predisposition. Stress, isolation, and adversity can actually trigger the development of these enhanced cognitive abilities as a survival mechanism. 6 months later, the Davidson Institute for Advanced Young Minds opened its doors to 37 children from around the world, each carefully selected for their extraordinary pattern recognition abilities and intuitive problem-solving skills through a comprehensive evaluation process that considered not just intelligence, but emotional resilience and creative potential. The campus, built with Marcus's fortune and designed according to Emma and Lucy's detailed specifications, looked more like a combination of playground and research facility than a traditional school, with laboratories that felt like discovery centers and classrooms that encouraged exploration and wonder. Emma, now completely healthy and serving as the Institute's youngest research director, stood with Lucy in the main laboratory, watching their fellow extraordinary children work on projects that would have challenged seasoned professionals with advanced degrees. The sight filled her with joy and pride. Children who had once felt isolated and misunderstood were now thriving in an environment that celebrated their unique gifts. "Remember when you told me the vault was trying to communicate?" she said to her best friend and intellectual partner, watching a group of 7-year-olds design a water purification system that could operate in remote areas without electricity. "Of course," Lucy replied, smiling as she observed another team developing a new approach to solar energy that could revolutionize renewable power generation. "Everything important is trying to communicate with us. We just have to learn how to listen with our hearts as well as our minds. The universe is full of patterns and connections, waiting for people who know how to see them." Marcus observed from the observation deck, marveling at what his daughter and Lucy had created together with the help of educators and researchers from around the world. The children weren't just studying advanced subjects. They were developing solutions to real-world problems with a creativity and insight that amazed the adult researchers who worked alongside them as collaborators rather than traditional teachers. Dr. Martinez, now the Institute's chief scientist, approached with the latest research findings, her face glowing with excitement. The cognitive enhancement therapy based on Emma's genetic treatment is showing remarkable results. The children's abilities are developing even further when they work together in supportive environments. We're seeing increases in pattern recognition, creative problem-solving, and emotional intelligence that exceed all our projections. "It's not just about making them smarter," Lucy explained, overhearing the conversation while watching a group of children develop an artificial intelligence system that could predict weather patterns with unprecedented accuracy. "It's about helping them understand that being different isn't something to hide or be ashamed of. It's a precious gift they can use to make the world better for everyone." The Institute's first major breakthrough came when a team of 8-year-olds developed a new approach to cancer treatment that combined genetic therapy with frequency-based cellular repair, potentially offering hope to millions of patients worldwide. Their second major success involved a group of 9-year-olds who created an early warning system for natural disasters that could save countless lives. But perhaps the most important achievement was simpler and more profound. 37 children who had felt isolated and different, their entire lives now understood that they weren't alone, that their unique abilities were valuable, and that together they could accomplish things that would benefit all of humanity. "You know what the best part is?" Emma asked Lucy as they watched the sunset from the Institute's roof garden, surrounded by other children whose brilliant minds were now focused on healing the world rather than simply surviving in it. "What's that?" Lucy replied, though her empathic connection to Emma meant she already knew the answer. "We proved that the most impossible problems really do have the simplest solutions. Sometimes all it takes is love, hope, and the courage to believe that even the smallest person can change everything." Lucy nodded, thinking back to that morning when she had walked alone to Davidson Industries, carrying nothing but faith and a worn notebook full of dreams. "And sometimes," she added softly, "the greatest treasures are hidden behind the strongest locks, waiting for someone with a pure heart to set them free." As the stars appeared overhead, the children of the Davidson Institute continued their work, their brilliant minds united in the common purpose of healing a world that desperately needed their unique gifts, proving that love, hope, and extraordinary minds working together could overcome any obstacle.